Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Dejha Ti.
And I'm Ania Catherine.
Ania and I have a collaborative practice bringing together creative technology, immersive environments, and performance art. Today, we are going to be contextualizing our practice and the use of blockchain in our practice in the larger history of our use of technology, as it is a core component of our practice. Should we show? Do you want to add anything before I?
Yeah, and I just want to give a little warning that we're getting the subject of the talk, the creative use of the blockchain. We're really going to take you on a long journey to contextualize exactly how we approach blockchain, just as we would approach any other technology that we would work with. So bear with us. Excited to have you for the ride, and we'll show you a bit about a bit of a past work now, just so it's a little less abstract.
Yes, a little collage. Okay, so that just gives you a little flavor of what we've done in the past. So moving forward, we want to talk a bit about our rule set for art and technology. And I think this is really important because I think when you watch this, there was a lot of flesh, there was a lot of organic elements. And you'll see that this is a thread in our practice. And even though you can't see it with your naked eye, there's a lot of technology embedded. So I think let's go through our rule set for art and tech. So
and to chime in and give a little bit of context as well as why I think our work looks the way it does. My background is in choreography and performance art and movement. So before we started working together, was entirely focused basically as on the body as a medium, movement, performance. And Dejha's background is very different.
Yeah, my background is in human-computer interaction and also immersive environments, building large-scale physical environments and embedding the technology within it. So kind of fabricating from the ground up these environments that you can walk inside of. So as we think of immersive art, I think these are the things that we keep in mind. So one of them is no tech demos. This is really important, that when we're creating an artwork, we're not trying to show the capability of the technology that we're using, right? We're not trying to say, well, we're pushing this limit here and the capability here, and it does this and it does that and this and that. That is not an aim of our practice.
And the next one is don't rely on scale. And I think when working with technology and especially knowing kind of the impact and the wow factor that large-scale works can have quite easily, I think we've always tried to keep ourselves working at a standard that we're not relying on just, the thing being big and shiny, but we're actually really looking at what the technology is doing, what is the message, what's the concept, what are we trying to achieve? And if scale helps us achieve that, then we'll use it. But we're not, just knowing that if you do something big and shiny, everyone's gonna love it. It's like a little easy.
Next is always asking ourselves when we use the technology in our art practice, asking if this technology is no longer novel, will the work still hold up, right? So is the artwork relying on the technology in order to have a foundation?
And this Namjoon Paik piece, we're giving as an example of this isn't the newest TV model, and it's like, look how great this screen is. Like, this work is completely timeless because he wasn't relying on how exciting and new and special the features of the TV were for the work to have a message and a meaning. It still stands and is just as strong today. So that's very aspirational for us. And back to my choreography background, we love Yvonne Rainer, and she says no to spectacle. So I think this is just making sure that we're not, blurring the lines between art and entertainment in a way that we feel we want to, protect what is art, what is a tech demo, what's a spectacle, and how can we untease all of those things and stay true to the fact that we're artists first and foremost. And so as kind of a process of elimination, of avoiding doing certain things that we knew that we didn't want to do, that is kind of very helpful to figure out what we do want to do and what our voice is and what our style is. And I think what has definitely emerged over the last 6 years is always using technology conceptually. So understanding the technology, how it's used, why, how it functions in society, what its limits are, what its opportunities are, and understanding a technology before using it. And then also, because of the kind of the timelessness of what we want to create, or the desired timelessness of what we want to create, a lot of our works have a lot of technology that's hidden and invisible, so you don't even see that there's technology at work a lot of times. And also this kind of what you probably saw in the past work, a fleshy approach to human-computer interaction. So when possible, we like when people are feeling and touching physical things, and there's a strong presence of the human body instead of it feeling or looking obviously digital. And to culminate our rule set, I think the major one and the major takeaway is that tech doesn't age well, but concepts do. And so if we use this as our North Star, then I think we find ourselves in a pretty good place. So we're going to go through 3 examples before we get to the artwork that we've created that leverages the blockchain. And the first examples are soft evidence, which we created in 2021, On View, which was our first museum commission in 2019, and I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Then, which was created in 2020 in collaboration with Makta, who has brought us here today. So thank you for having us. So soft evidence, this was commissioned by Media Futures and the European Commission, and the call of this, I would say, the aim of this project and also the research and innovation program was really to look at synthetic media, AV manipulation and mis and disinformation. And so we specifically focused on synthetic media and deepfakes. So Soft Evidence is a slow synthetic cinema series that was kind of depicting events that never happened. And the format that this work takes is 9 scenes and a testimony scene.
And so the project leverages machine learning, computer vision, artificial intelligence in order to create this deepfake. And we'll get into a little bit how we created that, but you can see some of the behind the scenes right here. So to give some backstory on how deepfakes are usually perceived, you usually think of celebrities saying really funny or weird things, or politicians saying something that they've never said. But really, one of the leading issues are personal attacks, specifically on women, usually through the way of non-consensual pornography that is shared in direct messaging apps like Telegram or WhatsApp in order to create a personal attack. So we wanted to use the technology, both conceptually, but also speak to the issues of deepfakes at hand. So you can see Soft Evidence has 9 scenes and 1 testimony. So you can see the 9 scenes here and the testimony. Oh, I lost it. There you go.
There's the testimony.
Yeah.
And so I think when we were thinking about synthetic media and mis and disinformation, one thing that definitely came up with us that we feel is exacerbating those issues is kind of the speed of the consumption of media. And I mean, also, personally, we're big fans of slow cinema, so any excuse to work in the medium of slow cinema we will take. But also, I think conceptually looking at a new need for slowness in our consumption of media, and to see an image or a video, and we need to kind of get out of the mindset of seeing an image or seeing a video and thinking that that's always attached to a real event of something that happened, because that's just, we're entering into a chapter of history where that's not always going to be the case. And so there's really two issues when it comes to synthetic media. One is you can depict someone doing something that they've never done. And two, you can have people who write off a video or a photo of them doing something as being synthetic when it actually wasn't. And this is something that particularly people in power will be able to say, oh no, or I'm a police officer and I killed someone and it's on video, I could say that's a deep fake. So this is kind of the way that there's two prongs of this issue. And the way that the audience would experience soft evidence is what we're calling this productive confusion. So you see this testimony of a character who's saying all the things that she's never done. So she's saying, I never went to the laundromat, I never did this, I never did that, but then meanwhile, you're looking at a video of her doing that very thing. And so you have this, I don't know, the two, what you're hearing and what you're seeing are clashing against each other. And we're going to have a lot of this experience moving forward with media. And so this is kind of what we wanted to highlight in terms of how the audience experiences the work. And as you probably noticed, there is a very classic cinema style to the deepfake. So again, going back to the kind of desired timelessness of the work, and also not wanting it to become about a political subject, so keeping the content kind of politically neutral in order for it to really just be a ground for conversation about AV manipulation that doesn't alienate certain people. If I, for example, using Donald Trump or using Mark Zuckerberg, and then people are talking about Donald Trump instead of talking about the problems of AV manipulation. So that's kind of why they became what they became and why we're depicting them that way.
And to give you a little behind the scenes on how we created the deepfake. So in order to create a convincing deepfake, you need a lot of data. And the way that you can do that is you can use data that is already publicly available or from a data set, whether it's open or a private one. And the other is that you could create your own, which is what we did. Because there's a lot of issues with open data sets, right? So just because a data set is open doesn't mean it's free of problematic issues. And also another issue is that the idea of consensual data capture and consensual classification, when you think about machine learning and you think about having to put every face within a sort of classification, what if that person doesn't consent to that classification that you've put them in, right? This is classificatory violence. You can read more about this from Dr. Kate Crawford. She has a book called Atlas of AI. I highly recommend it. So you can see we shot 5 days in Mexico City to create our own data set. We had a source subject, which is this actor right here, and then also a destination subject, which was Ania. She was the body double. You can see them next to hair and makeup right there. I was really freaked out that morning.
You're like, which one's my wife?
Yeah, we're also married. And as part of that, we created a synthetic media contract as well, and which just kind of read like a poem. I'm not going to read it right now because we don't have time. So
it's tempting.
It's going to keep going. So we had the body double and the data body. Here are the two next to each other. We captured the source footage. We captured our subject in many different lighting schemes. You can see them here, left and right. And then we applied that facial essentially, we did the face swap on top of the destination footage. The way that we did that is that we used machine learning to develop a face model, and we used a deepfake algorithm that uses convolutional neural networks in order to achieve its results. So you can see some of the computer interface.
And just tying this back to how we use technology, I think as you can see, the intention of this was to show what's possible and how easy it is now to create deepfakes. And so again, this idea of technology being invisible. So if this looked like it was highly altered or we were playing around with, should we show some of the artifacting? Because, visually, aesthetically, it's really cool. But we're like, if the point of the work is to show how realistic it can be, then you look at this and you just think that we made a film, and it's very, very unclear to the naked eye how much went behind the scenes.
And just last note on this project, we ended up using Telegram as a conceptual tie to the distribution of deepfakes on messaging apps. So the way that you experience the artwork is a blend of actors and real audience participants interacting within a closed Telegram group. So moving forward, the next piece is On View. So in 2019, we were commissioned by the SCAD Museum of Art, and we created a piece that really speaks to the generational desire to be the subject of an art experience. Think selfie museums, digital art museums on every corner, the perfect selfie backdrop, right? And so we thought of this, we were going to Art Basel, and you see Art Basel Miami, and everyone's looking at the art, but like through their phone and with their back to the art, right? And so this is an interesting phenomenon. And also as experiential artists, we were often asked to create these selfie backdrops and immersive installations. So we wanted to create a piece that really speaks to that. And the other aspect that it speaks to, and we really kind of discovered this in the process, is the idea of surveillance capitalism, extractive technologies, and data extraction in general. And this aspect is a thread that we will continue to see working into our present work. So we wanted to give some groundwork on this project.
Yeah, so On View, is this working? I feel like it got loose. Mm-hmm. Okay. So as you can see here, On View is a pretty... Thank you. Was a large-scale, three-phased experience. So here's some of the sketches, and there's the floor plan so you can see. So this was basically an entire large rectangle that every single wall and ramp and curve and texture material choice was designed by us. So it was quite ambitious. And so we'll go through the three phases. The first phase of this artwork was called the terms and condition. And interestingly, this initially, then the next one is the Stages Gallery. And the third one is the Golden Gallery. Here's, again, different view. And so in the terms and condition, we wanted to take that experience of clicking I agree to a terms and condition that you never read and use our medium of experiential art to kind of help people feel the weight of that decision. Because when you see it small and it's like this, it's like, what does that actually mean? Is this even a real agreement? And so we kind of took that experience and made an immersive contract that the audience participant had to sign with their body by standing in a sensor in the floor and kind of consenting to us putting them on view. So there was a performer who was kind of like a Cheshire Cat host of the room who was like, go ahead, sign, and then people signed and gave us their consent in order to move on to the next phase.
So the next phase is called the Stages Gallery. So this was the middle section that you saw in that floor plan. And it was a dark, black, reflective environment with two-way mirror and dark plexiglass. So it was really hard to tell if you were looking at a reflection or if you were looking through glass where you sort of saw your reflection but someone in the distance. And so it was very disorienting in this idea of two-way mirror, and also data privacy is a huge aspect. And you can see here, it looks very physical, right? But there are sensors embedded in the floor, in the walls. We're using computer vision and facial recognition to develop a user profile. And you can see here someone sitting within one of the stages, and they're activating sensors in the chair. Or in this other example, their arms are touching the wood, and there's sensors behind the wood, right? We're just measuring how close they are to a physical surface. And all of this then triggers and speaks to a system, which we use Touch Designer as a main brain. And what it does is it activates the system, right? So it's like there's no virtual layer between you, and the sort of virtual environment that you're controlling, but instead you put physical input in and you receive physical input out, or output. And so what we've done is that in the stages that you essentially activate them and they take your photo. But they only do this if you're in a body position that is designed by us, which ties to predictive choreography. I don't know if you want to touch on that briefly before the Golden Gallery.
I think Golden Gallery.
Yeah? Okay, keep it going.
And the third and final phase, and what happened in the stages gallery was they were kind of parallels to the selfie stage, where you had these moments where the installation took your photo. And so then in the Golden Gallery, you would go again, stand on a sensor, and this time you stood in front of a gold frame behind bulletproof glass, and your image came up in front of you. So that moment and what you had agreed to in that first space was essentially becoming the subject of the artwork. So we were playing with this question of, are you going to see what's on view, or are you going to see yourself on view? And so what On View did was it put the audience participant and made them the subject of the work. And the way that their photo came up was what looked like a security camera above the gold frame was actually a facial recognition camera. So while you were going through the stages and getting your photos taken, we were building a user profile of you. So when you stood in front of the case, the facial recognition camera found your face from all the photos that were taken in there, and then you became the subject of the art. And you also kind of realized in that moment, which is I think the moment of On View, that the whole time the environment was tracing and tracking and monitoring you and building a profile about you and watching your every move, which is kind of the feeling we wanted to achieve, because that's kind of the way that our digital architectures currently work.
So the technology approach, and we're showing some of the behind the scenes here and also the technical drawings, because this gives you a sense of all the technology, right, that's hidden behind the walls, under the floor, and also the computer vision aspects. So you can see on the left, that's a Touch Designer screen record. And then on the right, you can see the room that it's controlling, right? So you have these physical sensors, and then you have the input into this machine, and then you have the output is physical as well. This is controlling dozens of microprocessor devices, so Arduino boards for any of you who are familiar, and wiring them up in order to create one full system that works together. And so I think where we really landed here was thinking through the idea that visible technology doesn't necessarily equal high tech, right? So if you can see it with your naked eye, it's probably something more low tech. Now, here's a project on the left-hand side, which I created in 2014, obvious digital project, right? And to the naked eye, you can see with the immersive projection mapping. On the right, we have just drywall, paint, a room, right? With a human body in it. And this is the project that actually excels in the advanced technologies.
And I think that also speaks to where technology is going with IoT as well, and technology is getting smaller and sleeker. And so it's interesting that within the digital art sphere, we're thinking bigger and flashier is somehow more advanced, but then parallel, we see that everyone wants their technology to be smaller and more invisible in real life. So our art is trying to reflect how society is working, and the way it's working now is it's becoming less noticeable. So this brings us to I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Then, which also includes Makta as a big part of this history. So in 2019, right after on the heels of On View, we met Serena Tabaki from Makta, and we had this long conversation with one of the curators that was working with Serena at the time, Eleonora, and we were talking to Serena about maybe this person graduated from On View and they're like, what do we do about this? So we have this experience, we know this is a big problem, but what could we do about it? Is there something that's a wearable that we could kind of speak to the issue in a different format than an immersive installation? And so then the idea of the signal blocking trench coat came about. So this trench coat was created in 2020, and we worked with a fashion designer, Barbara Sanchez-Kane, based in Mexico City, and we just had this idea of a garment that you would wear that kind of like takes you off the grid. So anything put in this signal blocking pocket is completely offline. It's like a Wi-Fi dead zone that you're wearing, which is really interesting. And then this show was shown in this exhibition in Rome in fall of 2020, Renaissance 2.0 2.0. and then it traveled to us in Berlin, where we were at the time. Was that a notification?
It wasn't a notification.
Oh, okay. And then it traveled to Berlin in 2020, where we realized the trickiness of displaying a coat that is so subtle, because again, we didn't put anything on the outside of the coat that makes it look like it has any specific functionality or that it's a piece of wearable technology. So when it's displayed, it kind of was like, is that a coat check and only one person wore a coat today? And so we had to get creative with how we display the work so people understood why it was in a digital art exhibition.
So here you're going to see the translation of the coat and the coat's capabilities into an immersive experience. This was put on view in Berlin in 2020. So we're going to play this to give you some context, as it's a key aspect of where we're going to end with the project. Thank you for coming on this journey with us, our blockchain-focused project.
I'd rather be in a dark silence than, in 2020, is a signal isolating and blocking a trench coat, the first piece from Ania and Dejha Ti's privacy collection. Commissioned by the Museum of Contemporary and Digital Art and in collaboration with fashion designer Barbara Sanchez-Kane, the coat merges conceptual art, fashion and function. The visibly absurd pockets are lined with military-grade fabric to keep wireless technologies offline. It's a technique primarily used in law enforcement and digital forensics.
This pocket performs blocking of signals is a reminder as you put it on every day.
Combating these extractive technologies and these invasions of our privacy constantly through our devices.
For I'd rather be in dark silence than, the exhibition at Factory Berlin, the artists took an experiential approach, designing a world and a multimedia interpretation that conveyed the code's function. Audience participants were immersed in a multi-sensory experience, exploring the subjects of extractive technologies, data privacy and surveillance, in which they were both observers and also subjects. The function of the code, rendering the wearer's location and identity invisible, was explored through various outlets such as 360-degree projections, a short film, an augmented reality filter, art photography, a sound score, and poetry, all seamlessly woven together for a singular experience. A short film featuring the code and animations was projected in 360 degrees around the audience. Life-size art photography prints were on view, and upon a close look at these images, you'll notice their faces are blurred out. Viscerally communicating the feelings of being a subject under surveillance capitalism is a poem entitled "Privacy is Fake Now," a spoken word performance interlaced with custom spatial sound score, which plays throughout a 64-speaker system hidden behind mesh walls. Discoverable QR codes were embedded in the environment and led to an augmented reality Instagram filter. This filter, when applied to any human form, blurred and concealed the person's identity. Another layer of the experience, audience participants could use it on themselves, other attendees, as well as on the artwork itself. The artists ran their live-action footage through this AR filter and incorporated it into the projected short film.
So this project in 2021, a few months ago, right, 6 months ago now, won the Lumen Prize for Art and Technology in the immersive category. And this project, we felt that because it was coming from the translation of the code, which was kind of had roots in On View, we then translated to this installation, and we have yet one more translation, which brings us to our current project. But I first want to share, this is the AR filter that you saw used. So if any of you have Instagram, if you scan this, it will bring you to the AR filter, and you can also be invisible.
You can also be invisible.
And you can also find it on our IG, which is operator. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so that brings us to
The subject of our talk.
Yes, the creative use of the blockchain. Okay, I'll let you go.
So we have done, as you saw, in On View, the subject of privacy became really central to our practice, which led into the trench coat, which then led into this installation. And we've kind of, for many years, since 2019, been very adjacent to the art and blockchain space, including speaking at the first ever cutoff in 2019, which I think was the first time a CryptoPunk was ever displayed. So we were all kind of in the same fairs before there was a lot of attention on digital art and NFTs as there is right now. So this has been a space that hasn't been really foreign, but we didn't really dive in. But we were very interested in, okay, the subject of privacy in Web 2, we've really explored. But we were also thinking about translating the idea of private, or at least turning our focus from privacy in Web 2 to privacy in Web 3. And what's really interesting is it takes on a completely different format in that context. And so what we decided to do when looking at our first pieces, not only that people can collect, which has never had a role in our work because of the nature of what we have been making, but also our first time working with the blockchain directly. And as you saw in past projects, working with any technology always requires a lot of thought and intention, and so we decided to make our privacy collection, which is our exploration of privacy within Web3 through a series and a collection of NFTs, which just was launched in April and will culminate in December.
So as Ania said, we were really looking about asking ourselves, how does privacy function in a Web3 context? And one of the key aspects that we found is that there's a tension between privacy and transparency, right? The idea that there's a complete transparent ledger, you can see all of the transactions, and therefore there's full transparency on what mechanisms are at play. At the same time, that can be a nightmare for privacy as well. So let's look into what that friction provides. So the first thing that we released is a privacy key 00. We minted this NFT. There's actually an edition of 9 of them. And we minted this key on Tezos, Rarible actually. And this is really meant to be, when you were looking at this, you know, this is a visual representation of the key, but it's really not meant to be the art and the focus of the art. But instead, the functionality of that key is the thing that we really want to focus on, which is a living relationship between us as the artists and our first collectors. The other aspect of why a key, well, when we think about the blockchain and specifically Ethereum blockchain, we think of the cryptographic systems. And these cryptographic systems really rely on key pairs. So we figured that this would be a great basis to continue to build upon this vocabulary.
So this privacy key 00, you'll also see there's details that are on the key, like the key kind of has a pocket, so the same pocket that's on the coat is embedded into the design of the key, and that open triangle in the top of the back of the coat is also, there's a cutout on the key, so we're also making links between the origin of the fashion coat and translating that into the design of the NFTs, as well as the fact that it's in the shape of a utility knife. Is a little bit tongue-in-cheek to the idea of art and utility within Web3, that the artwork has to have some sort of utility, but the reason why this piece, we're calling it not art, it's kind of like the ticket to the movie theater, is we're experiential artists, and so having this thing that's like a token that our collector has that brings them on a journey through, it could be physical touch points, digital touch points, and this ongoing relationship, or however this exploration takes, it's kind of like this promise. And that was how we approached our very first mint, which is important to stay true to our experiential nature with the first thing we ever minted on the blockchain. And this piece was first displayed and released as part of an art and NFT during Freeze LA as part of the Digital Roots exhibition by Vertical Crypto Art and Tezos and Rarible. So we displayed the key for the first time next to the trench coat.
And so the next touch point on the roadmap was the privacy dinners, which happened in 3 different cities. They happened in Berlin, Lisbon, and Paris. And these dinners were the first time that the privacy key holders were able to, tap into the functionality of this key that we released, right? So we released the key in late February, and then in early April, we began having the privacy dinners. Now, experiential art, this is our native tongue, so it made sense for how can we engage with the blockchain and NFT space in a way that ties to our experiential art practice. And so we thought, what better way than to host a dinner? But this dinner was hyper-experiential. It was taking the concepts of privacy and translating them into food, the sort of the scent and the many different palettes. There were performance aspects, and when I say performance, not sit on a stage and perform, but I mean more experiential and an immersive quality in immersive theater. Do you want to speak to that at all?
No, they were just so fun.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you can see
Daniela.
this Polaroid down here. We had performers that were writing seed phrases on paper, like all throughout the night. So we're also trying to bring these elements of the blockchain into physical space, which is super interesting for us.
Also, if you lost the key that we gave you in the beginning of the night, you wouldn't be able to get your dessert.
You didn't get your ice cream.
Because it was served in a security box. And actually, some people wouldn't give up their key. They're like, no, this is my key.
Someone was like, I'm a Web3 educator.
Yeah.
I know that you're never supposed to give anyone your key. And I was like, damn, I never thought about that. That was a conceptual flaw.
I don't know if they gave her dessert.
I think someone else gave her
Yeah, they
dessert.
shared.
Okay,
They shared.
We digress.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
okay. So that was the first thing we ever created, was the privacy key, which was tied to this very experiential kind of open promise, which is really exciting. One of our key holders is here. Hey,
Yeah.
C. So then we move on to 2 weeks ago, we released the first lot of the privacy collection. So this is the first artworks that we created. It's a little making of video.
This shows us shooting, and then I'll speak after. Okay, so with attempts, what you're seeing here and in the behind the scenes footage, so we shot Ania performing, and we developed this into 11 vignettes. And we used AI motion capture. So if you're familiar with motion capture, you generally see these like giant suits with all these sensors, and it's really invasive. So we didn't use any of that, as you saw from the footage with Ania. There was nothing on her body, so we used computer vision, AI, motion capture, and then essentially what we did is we took that motion capture and the body movement, and then we rigged that to an avatar. So this glass 3D aspect that you see right here, this is actually an avatar that is driven by Anya's motion. And so in this one, you can see that she's projected inside of this avatar. She's kind of like trapped inside. But each of the 11 pieces have a different quality. So you can see a few of them right here.
And so the reason behind this mix of body and transparent avatar is, as we said, going back to this tension that's really present when you're thinking about privacy in the blockchain, which is privacy and transparency. And we're thinking a lot about the use of, for example, PFPs and hiding behind wallet addresses and pseudonyms, and this phenomenon of trying to hide in really creative ways within a transparent system. So what you see in all of these attempts, there's 11 of them, is me kind of trying to interact and like hide behind this transparent thing, trying to also align with this digital shell of I think we all can understand, trying to align our physical selves and our digital selves. And I'm kind of like zipping on different digital identities, and sometimes the avatar is like really in alignment with what my physical body is doing. Other times I'm doing one thing, the avatar was doing something completely different. So you have these like disconnected moments of alignment and misalignment, but that's kind of the premise. Also, we were feeling like there was a lack of the presence of the human body in a lot of the platforms when we were doing our research, and we felt like that was something that we could, bring strongly to the space.
And just to take a pause here, we premiered attempts at Kraftwerk Berlin, curated by the wonderful C, who's standing right over there, who will be speaking
tomorrow. Don't miss it.
Tomorrow. C is the curator of Unicorn DAO, and we'll be hearing all about it tomorrow, so please don't miss it. So we saw the video aspect and the visual aspect of attempts. But let's talk about the smart contract, right? Because we're always thinking about how can we use technology conceptually and also technically within our projects. So for this particular project, we wanted to extend the idea of the key pair, right? From the beginning, we talked about cryptographic systems and key pairs. We presented that sort of visually and high concept-wise within the privacy key 00, but we want to bring that into actual technical practice. So what we did within the smart contracts, we had 3 smart contracts, right? We built our own, and we uploaded it. We minted to our wallet, and then we used OpenSea to list it, but it was actually using our smart contracts, not OpenSea's. OpenSea is just kind of an interface for the purchase mechanism. So we had our primary smart contract, and then we have our royalty smart contract, and then we have a seed poem smart contract. And these two speak to each other. But they don't speak to each other yet because this will be something that's revealed down the line and will be triggered on our end. However, the primary contract will allow the collector to say, okay, I am the owner of this NFT. And then using the key pair, if they can kind of follow the breadcrumbs all the way down to the other contract, the seed poem contract, they're able to enter in their token ID, and with that token ID, they're spit back a string of words that are approximately 12 words that kind of fit to the idea of a seed phrase length, right? And you're taking that back, so we call these seed poems because they're just kind of, pulling conceptually, words from the actual concept of the code. And then with that string that you go and retrieve, and by showing that you are the NFT holder, these two create a key pair. Now we can use this key pair in many, many different ways, and what the exciting thing is that we're able to use this key pair as a way for collectors to come on the journey with us. And so if they're in an IRL event, right, or a virtual event, or if we wanted to continue to interact with them virtually, we can, and give them special access in many different ways. Speaking of the journey.
For where this is kind of going, as I mentioned, the privacy collection was a journey rooted in all the way from 2019, had all of these moments of translation. We just released the privacy key in February, and this whole experience is culminating in Miami. So we're releasing different lots of the privacy collection between now and then. So if any of you are going to be in Miami, please say hi.
Please say hi.
It's going to be fun.
So again, just to bookend it from the beginning, the idea and the creative use of the blockchain, I think it's really, really important to think about how tech doesn't age well, but concepts do, right? And to not just use the blockchain as something to leverage to sell your art, but as something to be a creative mechanism to support the concept. And not everything needs to be on the blockchain. Not everything needs to be an NFT.
Mm-hmm.
Ask, does this need to be an NFT? Does this need to use the blockchain? It might not. And therefore, maybe best not to use it, right? So I think it's important to be radical when you're deciding what technology to use for your project. And that brings us to the end. Please join us on our Telegram channel.
Did we go way over? Do we have questions time? Or if there are any questions, we're happy to hear them.
Hi, thank you for all informations, and I would like to ask, how did you create these private keys to share with attendees? I mean, which platform you create and share?
Okay, so the privacy key, this was, so what we created, the visual that you actually see, we developed in Maya. So this is, something that we designed from scratch, again, with a utility key kind of visual moniker, and the idea of these kind of ever-evolving keys that just kind of give you access to unknown things, right? So there is an ambiguous number of these keys as well. But that's just the visual representation. So the actual key itself, we created 9 editions of these, and we minted them on wearable Tezos as part of the vertical crypto art event at Freeze LA back in February. And so these key holders, we're able to communicate with them. There are a few anonymous key holders, which we have ways of reaching out to them.
The privacy and the anonymous key holder.
Yeah, so a lot of them have made themselves known, and in this way, we're able to create more of an interaction, right? But for the people who haven't, it's a little bit trickier. So this is why on the attempts within the smart contract level, and we weren't able to create a custom smart contract for Tezos on Rarible. For this, because of at the platform level, this wasn't possible to do what we needed to do. So this is another reason we created our own smart contracts. When we released the first lot, we were actually able to have no interaction whatsoever with the collector. And so this is how we're kind of extending the idea and kind of even improving on how to make the key functionality and the key pair functionality work, even if we don't know who they are.
Even if we have never interacted with them.
Right.
Yeah. Any other questions?
One in the back.
Oh, cool.
It was really inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just wonder, what were the challenges that you faced during the, all this designing Web3 concept? So, like step by step maybe, or like the biggest challenges you can say as well.
I would say the biggest challenges were navigating advice and staying true to ourselves and trying to balance the idea of you're creating something that I don't know, I feel like there's so much advice and there's so much information, there's so much do this and don't do this, or like, oh, you're new so no one would buy anything. Like there's just so much information about what to do and what not to do and how to approach the space and how to be successful in this space, or like does this need to sell out immediately, or if it's not successful. Like there's just so many strange I don't know, a lot of voices. And I think what was the most important for us is at the end of the day just be like, do we believe in this? Do we feel like this is something that we're really proud of? Does this approach feel good for us? And even if it went against some strategic advice or the overall, the general consensus on a certain subject, just like making sure that we were being true to ourselves and taking all advice and listening and definitely doing a lot of research, but doing what feels right for us, I think was really important. That was a challenge to navigate a complex landscape and very opinionated and very vocal landscape as well.
I think that the research aspect, you can get really buried within, right? There's so many options and there's limitless opportunity and possibilities. And so for us, it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, right? It's just like impossible. So I agree about kind of staying true But also, I think a key aspect was how do we drones? Very nice.
Drama.
Yeah, I was waiting for like the harmony to come in. Is not to fall into this like NFT hype vibe, right? So like for us, we were very present on that the entire process, and we're like, okay, in a way, we want to use crypto, like sort of crypto mechanisms on the back end, right? So you could see, you know, okay, I can recognize this, I can recognize that, right? And we're using that sort of like back end system, but on the front end, we're still like international art speak, true to our concept. You won't see us using, we don't use the word drop, for instance. You know, we're using like a lot release or something like this. And even in vocabulary and, you know, roadmap, I'm not going to use a roadmap, but we're going to use maybe that concept on the back end, but on the front end, we're really going to tie it to the core concepts of the work and of our practice. So I think doing what we can to really be conscious of how do we avoid the NFT sort of hype machine, because that's not art, you know.
It's also not sustainable.
It's also not sustainable. So yeah, these were some of the things we were thinking about. Do we have,
Yes.
There's a couple more questions. I don't know how much time we have.
Hi, thank you so much for not using the word drop because it makes me sick.
You're welcome.
I'm curious though because I feel like a lot of the times the conversations around NFTs end up in very bro-y sort of Discord chat environments, and I feel like the minute you try to get out of that circuit, it can be a little bit insular, ironically, much like the art market. How do you stay a part of that conversation without getting sort of corrupted by it, for lack of a better word?
We throw privacy dinners at all of the crypto NFT event conference sites. And then we invite them to dinner and we lure them over with food and performance, and they're like, okay, great, not another QR
We
code.
joke around, we're like,
Yeah.
we're not doing Discord, we're doing dinners.
Yeah.
So I think we're,
Conversation, a good palette for conversation.
yeah, I have found, it's so complex.
I mean, he's still navigating it, right? But I
Yeah.
think that's why I brought up using the crypto art back end and like even cryptographic system back end as like a framework and like a modular system that we can take and leave what we want. But on the front end, there's no need for us to say, hey, this is the thing that we're doing. We just need it to like support the function and the sort of functionality we need to pull from it. And so I think it's, you know, I think that's our main thing is like language discussion, vernacular. I think it's really hard though, but the privacy dinners are really important, I think, to this.
But navigating crypto bro energy is like, we should have a whole conversation about that. Because that's a thing.
I just want to say one thing about drops, though. So we were talking to our friend Tony Cruz, who wrote Privacy is Fake Now, the poetry piece for I'd Rather Be in a Dark Silence Than. And we were discussing the origin of the word drop. And he's like, that really comes from hype beast culture, right? And the intention of a drop is that you buy it and then you flip it, you know? And we're like, we don't want anyone flipping our artwork, so why would we call it a drop if that's not our intention? So just being really careful.
Also
and
has an
intentional.
appropriation issue as well.
It is, yeah. There was another question. I don't know if we can talk more.
Yes.
Thank you for that, yeah.
So
Okay.
let's talk about it with a view.
Thanks. Well, you already mentioned a few of the things. You said sometimes like this limitless in the horizons. And we have a conservative art collector that wants holdable things around the world, not just Istanbul, but you also have this in Paris, London, or LA. And I know that like having touched the NFT world this year, I know that like they're paranoid when they hear about the smart contract and everything. This is feels for them like going and coming back to the moon seems easier and more holdable than the smart contract. And do you feel that the NFT world, combined with also the fact that the digital arts combined with the technological innovations that are limitless and that can bring us really to a position like sky's the limit to where it's going. I'm sure there are many things that are going to happen in a few decades that we can't even foresee the seeds of.
Yeah.
So do you feel that this, for one, what's your feeling that the conservative, in brackets, the conservative art market, are they going to a little catch more on that, or is it going to be like really the digitals and the holdables? And do you feel that this limitless, endless technological uprising is going to affect the NFT world's future as well as your art perceiving? Like, is it like, do you feel that this limitlessness, is it scary, or is it like an endless light?
For me, it's like living and growing up in the US and being always overwhelmed by like how many versions of yogurt. But then there's like some days when I'm in a store that's really small and I'm like, there's only one version of yogurt. So I feel like the same with this question of the limitlessness of the technological capabilities. Sometimes I'm like overwhelmed by creative possibilities and options, and we're also married, so we're 24/7 just like, oh, and then we could do this, and we're like eating, and we're like, oh, or we could do this with this fork, and it's just like, okay. So sometimes that's really fun and nice. Other times it's like exhausting, a little bit daunting, and we also, I think, the word innovation and the concept of innovation like needs a lot of unpacking too, because there's this idea that innovation, like we're all going in this one direction that we all agree with is like forward, but there's so many ways that innovation could take us, and different priorities and values that different versions of innovation serve. And then on the question of contemporary art and digital and more, like you said, conservative or traditional collectors, bridging. I mean, I think there's a lot of work to be done to bridge, and I think that's also something that's been very important to us. Like, for example, we're going to events like Freeze and Art Basel, and then we're also going to events like NFT NYC and Non-Fungible Conference Lisbon, and we're really trying to position our project as contemporary art that is also happening to use blockchain. So that's been actually a mission, what you mentioned, is to be a project that can bridge the gap. And I do feel like a lot of the NFT live events can do something to try to meet the traditional art world somewhere that they can better understand, whether it's like leveling up the displays of NFTs, like paying attention to screens and calibration and, I don't know, display and wall text and having conversations instead of it feeling like sometimes just a PowerPoint or like a hotel room like screen just rolled out with no thought. Like that's very easy for a traditional collector, I feel, to write off as like this isn't real, this isn't going anywhere. So how can even the presentation and the contextualization of blockchain artworks help to meet people somewhere? And I think Tezos, who you heard from Diane earlier, did an amazing job of that at Art Basel Miami last year. They had a booth inside Art Basel that was very, I think, a moment where that more traditional art and collector scene started to feel welcome and seen and interested because of the way that they presented and contextualized those works.
Yeah, I think actually what Tezos did there elevated digital, crypto, NFT art to the level that, in terms of presentation, which is really difficult to do, and there aren't a lot of standards, right?
Yeah.
We know, Magda's doing wonderful work in this as well, but bringing a digital native, we're in the box, right? We're in the computer box, and then all of a sudden, let's bring it out into like this stuff here. It's like, learning to walk, you know? And so I think closing that gap, to your point, and to, I think, what you're getting to is when we close that gap between contemporary art and also crypto native art, I think then there can be a more fluid dialogue between the two, and a starting point for the conversation, because it is really hard to access. I think for some people, like the entry point into crypto art is like the barrier can be too high sometimes. So hopefully with some lowering of that as well.
Thanks.
So we're probably at time.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you for the
Thank you
questions.
so much.
And we're also free to talk outside or whenever.
Birazdan da aslında bu konunun üzerine güzel bir şekilde denk geldi. NFT'lerin nasıl sergilenebileceği üzerine Roxy Ferreira ve Joe Saavedra Infinite Objects'ten bize birazcık anlatacaklar. Hani hepimizin aklındaki olan soru bu. Satın aldık, MetaMask'imizde duruyor. Ama nasıl sergileyeceğiz? Birazdan onlara bağlanacağız. Teşekkürler.